Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint service. My name is David Clement, and I will be your worship associate this morning. Really grateful that everyone can be here this morning together. The Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint isn't just a building. We're a fellowship of like-minded people, following our own paths towards truth and self-discovery while supporting each other along the way. We're bound not by a creed of required beliefs, but by a set of principles, which can be found on our website. We're a welcoming faith and invite people regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Some announcements for this morning. This is a double your gift opportunity. It is second Sunday for our donation in August, and it will go to the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan Backpack Food Program at Eisenhower Elementary School. Our donations in the past have ranged from $875 to $1,400 in the last 4 years. Each $400 provides a weekend of food for a qualified child for a full school year. This month, Scaff Furniture Carpet One will match every dollar up to $10,000. Imagine $3 keeps a child fed over the weekend. Thank you for considering this. Also, a new adult education class started last week and will continue for the next 2 months. It's not too late to sign up. It's entitled What Moves Us? And it's about learning to enjoy and celebrate who you are in the world. If you're interested, please call or email Lynn to sign up. The class meets Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. Now, will you please join us beginning our service listening to a prelude from Jennifer Howard. Please join us now if you have a chalice at home, and you can light your chalice with us. This chalice is by Atticus Palmer. We call this light before us and hope that we may always remain a strong community, working together to make the world a better place. When we are grieving or sad, when we are challenged, when we need help, this flame guides us out of the darkness. When we are cheerful, when we celebrate, when we accomplish a great task, when we return to a place that makes us happy. The chalice reminds us to share our happiness with others. And at this time, please join me in reciting our covenant, recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service. We gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions, to increase goodness and justice.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning are from Jack Mendelson. When we gather together, we people of ancient dreams and wisdom and beauty, we come to grow. We come to be healed, to stretch mind and heart, to be challenged, to be renewed, to be helped in our own continuing struggles for meaning and for love, to help build a world with more justice and mercy in it, to be counted among the hopers and doers. In the face of cynicism, darkness, brutality around us and within, we seek to align ourselves with a living community that would affirm rather than despair, that would think and act rather than simply adjust and succumb. Today, we invite the spirit of our own humanity and the healing powers under, around, through, and beyond it, to give us the nerve and the grace, the toughness and the sensitivity to search out the truth that frees and the life that maketh all things new.
Good morning. Our meditation words this morning are those of the great poet of transcendentalism, Walt Whitman. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and the sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to anyone who asks. Stand up for the stupid and the crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence towards people. Take off your hat to nothing, known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all that you have been told at school or at church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body. Unitarian Universalists talk a lot about Henry David Thoreau, but I've discovered that when we stop talking about him as though he's Saint Thoreau, we find that at his core, he was just another complaining, understandably cranky, progressive person who wanted to save the world, or at least a piece of it. And that makes him a lot like most of us. In 1846, Henry David left his cabin in the woods and walked 2 miles into his hometown of Concord, Massachusetts, to run a few errands. As fate would have it, he bumped into the Constable Sam Staples, who had evidently decided he was fed up with Henry's ways. Constable Staples was tired of Henry protesting slavery and supporting his government that supported slavery. He hadn't paid his taxes for 6 years in protest. Sam Staples gave Henry a chance to pay up. Henry refused, and so Sam put him in jail. The constable actually arrested a seemingly harmless former pencil maker, former school teacher, Harvard graduate, sometimes carpenter, sometimes surveyor. And with that simple act, Constable Staples changed the course of history. Henry David owed the state of Massachusetts a total dollar amount of $6, which would be about $145 in today's money. Henry was just doing what he could to fight what he felt was immoral. On that day, he was another often complaining progressive whose soul, as Walt Whitman would say, had been insulted. Henry's soul had been insulted by the horrors of slavery, and now he was doing something about it. I should remind you that there was no famous predecessor who had also been jailed for disobeying an unjust law that Henry could tout. Henry was just an unemployed guy, a jack of all trades, who lived in a cabin on someone else's land, who owned only a rowboat and 140 books, and now he was in jail. Of course, we know that Henry ended up on the right side of history, but he had no assurance of that in 1846. Henry just knew he was doing the right thing. He had no badge of authority like being a famous author. That came later. I'm guessing many of the townspeople just saw him as the hermit who squatted on someone else's property out by old Walden Pond. I hope I didn't miss mentioning your favorite cause in this morning's PowerPoint. Forgive me if I did, but as you might guess, the list just goes on and on. Today, I'd like to think about how the battle for progress and justice, dissenting against unjust laws, how all of that does go on, and how we can maintain at least some of our sanity when we realize that it is a never-ending battle. It is obvious that it is a never-ending battle. For example, if you research the words, the history of dissent, you will learn that 2,500 years ago, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon decreed that every brick made should have his name on it. And now, in the British Museum is a brick from ancient Babylon upon which a Babylonian worker of long, long ago scratched out the tyrant Nebuchadnezzar's name and wrote his own. I know what many of you are thinking. That sounds like something I would have done. Tyrants still exist, of course. And many of us look for the modern equivalent of scratching out their name from the brick and putting your own on top of it. And we find some way, small or large, to make our voice heard. Or in simplest terms, we complain. But even though we know the struggle for human freedom has been going on for a long, long time, when we defeat some modern tyrant, we often act as though that's the final battle against evil. The legendary psychologist Carl Gustav Jung noted that after World War I, everyone thought that another war like that could never happen. And then World War II happened, and 10 years after World War II, people said the same thing. There can never be another world war. Jung thought that human consciousness was progressing, but he also said, nothing good can come into the world without it once producing a corresponding evil. Jung said, nothing good can come into the world without at once producing a corresponding evil. In his opinion, there will always be some evil to battle. And when it's defeated, some new evil will then arise in response to the momentary victory of the good. Jung spoke of this as if it were a mathematical certainty. And sadly, I think our experience often proves him right. Consider how the internet is used for great good. And when it first came into being, many people thought it would be an unqualified good thing for humanity. But now it is also used to perpetuate great evil. And think of how good it is to stay nice and warm by burning fossil fuels. But now that is bringing ruin to our entire planet. Yes, times are better than they used to be. But progress always seems to bring another way for humanity to mess up the world. And that is admittedly a bit depressing. In 1846, Henry David Thoreau had his own problems to fight. And the institution of slavery he fought against was just as urgent, just as evil as anything we deal with today. But Henry was nevertheless a happy warrior. He was excited to do battle against evil, even though he didn't have the advantage of being like a modern social justice protester who is happy to get jailed in the tradition of Gandhi or Martin Luther King, who were themselves happy to get jailed in the tradition of Henry David Thoreau. It seems there was no Thoreau-like hero of nonviolent protest before Thoreau, but still, he was happy sitting in jail. A webpage commemorating his short time in jail explains it this way. Thoreau once wrote, "The best place for each is where he stands." Henry stood in jail, and he took full advantage of the new experience. Fascinated, he pumped his cellmate for the history of the various occupants of the room and found that even here, there was a history and a gossip which never circulated beyond the walls of the jail. Henry used his jail time to think about the faults of the justice system, and he relished his new insights. The next morning, his fellow prisoner was sent to work at haying in a neighboring field, and Henry became unhappy only when he was told someone had paid his taxes, so he must leave the jail. He was so mad that someone had ended his protest. Someone had stolen the $6 of leverage he had over his own government. It was evidently his Aunt Marie who paid his taxes. But no matter. Henry still had some leverage because he knew how to write. And write he did. 2 years following his one night in jail, Henry David Thoreau wrote an essay inspired by his short time as a prisoner. And to say he got a lot of mileage out of his short incarceration is a big understatement. Constable Staples didn't torture or starve him, but through the power of Henry's writing, being jailed for just one night was all that he needed to get inspiration, the inspiration he needed to criticize his government, and the inspiration he needed to tell people how they should also criticize their government. Like the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah of ancient Israel, Henry loosed all of his anger on the immoral government of his country. He wrote, "How does it become a man to behave toward his government today? I answer that he cannot, without disgrace, be associated with it." He wrote, "Under a government which imprisons any unjustly, the true place for a just man is in prison." The modern title of Henry's essay, which has never been out of print, Civil Disobedience, is a misnomer. His essay, Civil Disobedience, is not about being civil or polite or nonviolent. It is about disobeying immoral laws in the government that makes them. Citizens being disobedient would be a good translation. His own original title for the essay was Resistance to Civil Government. And although Henry never advocated violence, he would later write a whole essay praising the abolitionist John Brown, who did commit violence. We are often taught that Saint Thoreau was a total pacifist, but that is not really clear. Henry's essay moved many famous leaders down through history, moved them to fight successfully for the good of humanity. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, John Lewis, and now Reverend Barber of the Moral Monday movement, and many, many others. From Henry, they learned that you have to be proactive. Walk right up to the edge of violence. Get the attention of people in power and hope you and the people of your movement don't go over the edge into violence. Henry's battle was against slavery. Our modern battle is against the slavery of racism and against global warming and for women's rights and for many, many other causes. We've had many victories, but the question is, how do we save the world that is in bad need of saving without accidentally killing ourselves with stress every time our soul is insulted? Or as the inelegant title of my sermon puts it, how do you save the world in your own rear end too? Henry David, the always complaining Unitarian, taught us about being disobedient to unjust laws. But as a transcendentalist Unitarian, he also taught people how to survive the wounds incurred by having your soul assaulted by many injustices of the world. The best place for each is where he stands, said Thoreau. Or, in less poetic words, you may be in jail, outraged that your tax dollars support slavery. Or you may be outraged that your own federal government is purposely slowing down the mail to influence the election in their favor. But whatever your problem, you treat it as your privilege, your happy lot to fight the good fight, even though it never ends. So, scratch out the name of the tyrant and write your own on top of it, however you can. Cover the back of your car with liberal bumper stickers, and that will be your essay on civil disobedience. And as good transcendentalists, when we protest, or just make our complaints heard however we can, we shouldn't do it with the idea of winning. If we are to save ourselves for the next inevitable confrontation, we must do our work just because it is the right thing to do. If our primary reason for fighting injustice is to win, then we may be crushed at every defeat. Crushed, for example, when our Supreme Court reversed voting rights protections for African Americans that were the hard-won victories of 50 years ago. To some people, this may sound like some ethereal, esoteric philosophy, but it is in fact a core belief of our old and proud tradition. It is best described in the transcendentalist, Buddhist, and Taoist thought we hold so dear, but it is also found in many other world religions as well. The wisdom reminds us that how we think about something actually changes the world, and that can save the world and you along with it. The wisdom reminds us to avoid getting attached to the desire to win a battle. Instead, just act for the good of others because it is the right thing to do, and victory will come as if a pleasant accidental side effect. And it reminds us that wherever you stand, it is the very best place for you to be. You probably never thought of it this way, that Henry David helped save a lot of people because he was another complaining progressive person. Yes, he was very eloquent. He was an original thinker. But first and foremost, it was his complaining spirit that turned him into our saint, Henry David Thoreau. It led to his refusal to pay his taxes, which got him locked up. That led to his writing out his complaints in an essay. That led to other people seeing the wisdom of his ideas that they would use to save the world too. It occurs to me, though, that we don't fully appreciate that it is our role in this world to complain, and not always politely. I guess we know it is our duty to speak our truth, as we say, which sounds a lot nicer than saying we are a bunch of whiners. But to those who oppose our ideas, we are just complaining. I suggest we wear that title proudly. But we often don't see our argumentative natures as something that is truly a holy part of this world that makes it better. We talk about how all of humanity is of great worth and how each life is precious, but we have no rituals, no liturgies that celebrate being liberal loudmouths who know how to create change. Such a ritual might actually have a saving effect. With that in mind, I would like to do something a bit unusual for a UU minister and administer a blessing on every one of you and on every progressive person who is, of course, an honorary UU. And I should mention, UU ministers seldom administer a blessing. We might get away with blessing someone's dog or house or saying something nice about their new baby, but that's about it. Nevertheless, I'd like to give this a try within the recognized limits of my position, because a blessing says, you are going to be all right because you are on the side of good. And like any blessing coming from a UU minister, it comes not from some God on high, but from careful, rational consideration of our principles, and from a concern for treating everyone with justice and compassion. And forgive me if I add some humor to this liturgy. It doesn't mean I'm not perfectly serious. My friends, blessed are you who moan and complain about the mistreatment of others. Your only reward may be that you are on the right side of history, but for you, that will satisfy. Blessed are you who have the nerve to risk angry stares at stoplights when people read your 20 liberal bumper stickers. Blessed are you who know for a fact that you are privileged because you are white. Your insight is food for your own soul and a blessing to all the world. Blessed are you few, you happy few, who are able to smile at defeat, knowing that the arc of the moral universe is indeed long, but that it bends towards justice. Blessed are you who give holy hell to big pharma, big oil, big bankers, big everything that makes their own self-enriching rules just because they can. Blessed are you, seekers of justice, who take time to celebrate victories over evil. Your soul is so often insulted when you see injustice, and you want to save the whole world at once. But even Henry David Thoreau often relaxed by a pond.
Our closing words are from John Lou Johnston. We shall overcome. When we truly celebrate the diversity of contributions and talents offered by all people, we shall overcome hatred and prejudice and oppression. When we can truly extend our hands to one another in loving acceptance, we shall overcome the past that haunts us now. Living in peace and freedom, we shall overcome the wrongs that have happened and the debts that have been left unpaid. Let us join together in that commitment to always overcome.
And let us extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.